Hi friends, it is time for us to dive into the next episode of The Witcher Netflix, episode 7, Before a Fall. I'm a little late with uploading this one, I apologize, so I'm probably going to upload both episode 7 and episode 8 this week because I'm a little behind. To be honest, I was very excited to talk about the first few episodes, because I had a lot that I wanted to say about a lot of the stories, but I feel episode 7 and 8, they just didn't really captivate me as much as some of the other episodes, so I wasn't as excited to talk about these. But nonetheless, there is still a lot that I want to say, some things that I want to talk about, so let's go ahead and dive into this one. So here is my thoughts on episode 7, Before a Fall.
This is on your queen. We will both die! Blame destiny.
So I feel this episode had a lot of the big aha moments for the whole timeline situation that was going on in this show. This is where things really start coming together from episode 1 with the fall of Sintra to now. If you were really in the dark and had no idea what the timeline was in your first time watching this, I think a lot of it is explained in this episode, or really what I do like to call it the aha moment, where, oh, okay, so Geralt was in Sintra at some time when Ciri was there, and it starts to make sense in a way. So all of the previous adventures that we saw Geralt going on with the dragon, with the Djinn, with the Striga, those were all pretty straightforward with correlating short stories that happen in the book. But here, this really doesn't follow anything in particular, or any story in particular. So here we have Geralt coming back for Ciri, his child surprise, and we learn it's 12 years later that he's here. And of course, as Queen Calanthe is still alive, this is all before Nilfgaard takes over Sintra. Well, this whole dialogue between Geralt and Calanthe is very interesting because I think it really leaves the viewer to think about what the situation is here, knowing all that we know now. So Geralt took 12 years to come back and get Ciri, his child of surprise. Meanwhile, Calanthe also is not really willing to give up Ciri, her granddaughter. So the two of them are butting heads because they don't want to honor this destiny that everybody seemed to be pretty okay with the last we saw during the banquet when Pavetta was still alive. So now there's this question of, if you don't honor destiny, bad things will happen. And Nilfgaard is right at Sintra's doorstep as we speak. And Calanthe is choosing to not honor this law of surprise. And Geralt also kind of ignored this for such a long time. So it leaves you to think, would all of this stuff had happened to Sintra if the two of them would have honored the law of surprise? Or it could just be that this was bound to happen anyway if you're one of those people who says screw destiny and doesn't care. But really, I think it's up for you to decide. Also, it's like, why is Geralt finally showing up after 12 years? Is it the thing that happened with Yennefer in the previous episode that made him realize the error of his ways, that he was ignoring this child, and getting into this big fight with Yennefer in the previous episode is what made him want to come and claim her? I don't know. I think this was one of those cool aha moments that I had mentioned earlier, where we remember this scene of Ciri dressed up like this in the first episode and looking over, and now we realize that Geralt was there at that time. And you had no idea from watching the first episode that Geralt was in Sintra at the time. But now, again, this is the aha, oh, it all makes sense. So what is Geralt doing post-fight with Yennefer? He's going to see Ciri. What is Yennefer doing post-fighting with Geralt? She's going to see her ex, Istrid. So how do I feel about this scene? I don't know, honestly. I don't really have a hate or love towards this whole thing with Istrid. It's obviously this is not something that happened in the stories, in the books. The question is it in Yennefer's character to do this? I think it would be, honestly. We see in the short story A Shard of Ice, Yennefer does have feelings for Istrid. She definitely would go back to him, I feel. And that's, something that she may have done at some point during the timeline in the books. We don't know. So for me, this whole reuniting with Istrid thing is not particularly something that I hated or loved. I was just kind of like neutral on the whole thing. Following the scene with Istrid, we meet a very, very important character, Vilgefortz. All the way to episode 7. I knew Vilgefortz was going to be in this season, and it took all the way to episode 7 for us to finally meet him. I will not actually spoil anything for the story, but Vilgefortz is a very important character, and he's a very interesting character in my opinion. We don't see a lot of him so far, so it's hard for me to make a final judgment on Vilgefortz the character. So far, I like him. I think he's interesting, but we'll see where they go with the character in season 2 and moving forward. But so far, I do like Vilgefortz. Though we see that Vilgefortz is already being a little sly here, trying to get Yennefer to come back to Aretuza, and he lies to Yennefer here where he says Tissaia is asking for her and Tissaia is not asking for her. Keep that in mind, that this Vilgefortz character, he's not always truthful and may or may not have an agenda. So I thought it was kind of interesting that they introduced this new character and he already is a little deceptive, and he already has a hidden agenda to bring Yennefer back. And then we have a scene where Yennefer is corrupting young, innocent sorceress students. How dare you, Yennefer? While the scene seems a little random at first, I think that it is a cool thing to show Yennefer's character growth and, making her think about where she came from, how she started, and trying to impart some of the knowledge that she's learned in the real world onto these young sorceresses. And I don't know, it's an interesting scene. It gets a little weird, I feel. The overall idea of the scene, I was understanding of what it was. So Yennefer is really digging into Aretuza in this scene and talking about how she really hated that they took away her choice and that the school is not everything that it's cut out to be. And when I was watching the scene, I was really trying to think that, is this something Yennefer would do? I'm thinking about the character Yennefer that I know and thinking that if what she's saying here in the show is really something Yennefer would say. And honestly, I don't really feel it is. I think the Yennefer we see here in the show feels very strongly about the choice that she wants to have a child. And I think that this is something Yennefer has always wanted, but I don't know. I feel like they went a little too hard on this concept and this theme for Yennefer in the show. I think the Yennefer we see here is just a little bit different in how she in her motivations and how she reacts to certain things. It's not exactly how I always saw Yennefer and her past and everything like that. I still feel that at least the show did a good job portraying this theme and this concept. So a few things about the second half of this episode. One, I like that all of the mages are meeting up together and having this whole big discussion. I personally love all of the sorcerers and sorceresses in the Witcher universe, so I just find this all really cool, and this is the first time we're really seeing them all together, and I got all giddy. Second of all, I love that it is showing a little more of these very important sorcerer characters that we probably will see more of in the future. Tissaia, for example, this gives us a little bit of a glimpse of Tissaia's character, talking about Aretuza is all she has, and how this brotherhood of mages is a very important thing to her. This is leading up to this next battle that we're gonna have, the Battle of Sodden Hill, which is a really cool battle, and I just very much liked the build-up that was happening for this epic season finale that they were going to have. So in this episode, we also get a rehash of a scene that we saw in the first episode, but with a little bit more context now, and we see that Geralt and Ciri basically just missed each other. Geralt was imprisoned in Sintra during the fall of Sintra and escapes and just barely misses Ciri as she's escaping. So it's like this moment where you as a viewer are like, oh man, they just missed each other. And yet, so it was another one of these aha moments that we see where everything starts wrapping up very nicely with a little bow on top. So like I said, a lot of the stuff that we're seeing in this episode is not something that we see in any of the short stories. So it's all kind of new to me and very interesting. I like the way they interpreted a lot of this stuff. So yeah, so I really wasn't sure what to expect when I had first seen all of the episode titles and seeing how this show was going to end. I didn't expect it to kind of take this route, but it was a very interesting route that they took nonetheless. The last thing I want to talk about for this episode is the final scene with Ciri, where we see her do a very special talent that she has, where she prophesizes. And this is something Ciri does quite a bit in the books. She does these creepy prophetic things. She says some very important lines here. Again, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it made me very, very happy. She was talking about Ithleen's prophecy, which if you read the first book of the saga, Blood of Elves, it's in the very beginning. This is Ithleen's prophecy, and here it is right here. Verily I say unto you, the era of the sword and axe is nigh, the era of the wolf's blizzard, the time of the white chill and the white light is nigh, the time of madness and the time of contempt. The world will die amidst frost and be reborn with the new sun. It will be reborn of the elder blood, of Hen Iker, of the seed it has been sown, a seed which will not sprout, but will burst into flame. So I was really giddy when Ciri was prophesizing right there and talking about things. And it leaves viewers wondering, what is Ciri? What are these crazy powers that she has? Well, we'll have to find out more in season 2, will we not? So that's all that I have to say about episode 7, the tying everything together episode. I feel like my thoughts were a little more jumbled in this episode than some of my previous episodes, but I still feel like I got to say a lot of what I wanted to say for this episode. Stay tuned for the season finale of season 1, so episode 8. We will discuss that shortly, and I look forward to talking about it with you guys then. Bye bye bye.